Right, hello and welcome to another Dauntless Development video. Now, as I'm sure you know, we're going to be discussing which is best, Unity or Unreal Engine in 2020. Now, we're coming to the kind of close of the year, and a lot of stuff's happened, in especially with regards to Unity, and we're gonna cover that because a lot of things have kind of changed, and it's worth keeping note of that. So, I'm gonna start off with just covering a few key points of Unity. Now, Unity uses C#, so the programming language C#. It's completely free to use and make profit off until you earn over 100,000 US dollars in within a 12-month period. So say if you earned $99,000 in the 12 months and then you earned 1,000 the next month, then you wouldn't have to pay a thing. And it supports building for all major platforms, which is good to know for any engine. So you can build for mobile, you can build for all the consoles, you can build for PC, Mac, Linux. And I'm pretty sure if there's anything that you can't build for, you can probably get a plugin to do it. But yeah, there's just some quick key points there. Unreal uses C++, so it's a different programming language. They are very similar, however C++ is definitely more complex. It's completely free until the lifetime revenue of a specific product, so the specific product you license when you publish under it, until the lifetime revenue of that exceeds 1 million US dollars, which I did not realize. And then after that point, it's 5%. I did not put that in there, but yes, it's 5% of your revenue. And it also supports all building for all major platforms. Now, as a cost comparison, if you're earning $1 million USD revenue, that is, and the one thing to note is it's revenue, not profit. So if you earned, if for example your costs ended up coming to that million, you would still have to pay the 5% because that it's not about profit, it's about revenue. So that's one thing to just keep in mind. So you've got 1 million revenue. For UE4, your cost's going to be $50,000, which really isn't anything when you're earning $1 million, as long as your costs weren't absurd. Unity, it'll cost you $1,800 per developer. So to compare with UE4, you could have 27 developers, all licensed, for 48,600 when you were earning that much. And that's because if you're earning that much, you would need the Pro license. Now, if you were to have 28 developers, then you would go over. But that's obviously just for that specific boundary. I mean, then if you earned even more, say you earned 2 million, that cost for Unity wouldn't go up. Whereas if you earned 2 million with UE4, it would double. However, if you earn $200,000 in revenue, UE4 costs nothing. Which I'm still, even though I have read it off their own website and I know that it's right there in plain English, I still have trouble believing that they don't charge anything below $1 million lifetime revenue. But it's apparently true. And Unity is 1,800 per developer still. So if you were, say, a solo developer, because if you're a solo developer, you're not going to be, most of the time anyway, you're not going to be looking at earning $1 million in revenue. So in terms of as a cost comparison, Unreal really takes it home. Like, Unity is, if you, as I said in the previous slide, in the one about Unity, it's free until you earn $100,000 in 12 months. And then you pay a fee of $399 per seat. So, if you were a solo developer, Unity, and you're not expecting to get $100,000, then Unity is still completely fine. It's going to be free. I mean, realistically, even $100,000, it's a very small fee. In terms of the costs, it doesn't cost much to use either, but it is definitely worth knowing that you could, until you earn $1 million lifetime revenue from UE4 on a specific product as well, Unity is the license to use Unity. So if you had, say, 10 products and they all earned over 100,000 together in 12 months, then you'd have to pay that license fee. UE4 is a specific publishing license for that product. So if you earned 500,000 on one product and 500,000 on another, you would still pay nothing. I don't understand that, but it seems absurd, but you would still pay nothing. So that's definitely a win for Unreal in that regard. In terms of ease of use, Unity Engine has a huge amount of online tutorials. I mean, there are so many YouTubers who have Unity tutorials. I mean, Brackeys, he's just finished up now, but he has a wealth. There are years of videos of literally covering just about anything you could imagine. And he's not the only person. There are hundreds of Unity tutorial videos out, like YouTubers out there. And of course, there's also Stack Exchange, which has loads of stuff. There's the Unity forums themselves. There's loads of stuff on there. In terms of wealth of information online, there's so much for Unity. Debugging is pretty easy on Unity. There's a few weird error messages, but most of them, you get used to them, and you get used to following them, and they're relatively clear. And they're all within the editor, so you don't have to go outside of the editor most of the time to find out what's wrong. The editor will tell you what's wrong, and then you can just go straight to the code. Documentation is very clear. Unity's documentation is fantastic. I've never had a problem with it. If I need to look something up in the documentation, it's always been very clear. It's complete. It fully describes everything. It describes all the variables, what they do, and it also provides examples for everything. Everything I've looked up anyway, there's been an example of it being used, which is very important, because sometimes just the description isn't enough. You need to see it working. They've also recently implemented a visual scripting language called Bolt. Now, that used to be an asset on the store, but I think they recently acquired Bolt, and it's now official. And this is very recently, so I think this is within the last couple of weeks, which has always been something that has kind of deterred people from Unity a bit, because Unreal, I'll get onto this more in the next slide, but Unreal has always, well, not always, but for a very long time had a visual scripting language called Blueprints, and Unity has only had it through the asset store, and people obviously prefer the first party assets as opposed to third party. And it uses C#, as I covered earlier. Now, one reason I've mentioned that in ease of use is C# is a much simpler language than C++. There's a lot less to worry about. There's a lot less you can break. There's a lot less rules to worry about. You're missing a lot of things you've got to consider in C++. So it's a relatively beginner-friendly language, especially in comparison to C++. So that's one thing to keep in mind when it comes to ease of use. So if you're a beginner and you want to get into programming, but you haven't really programmed much before, it's definitely worth going for C# just because it's a lot easier. So, Unreal Engine, it's got a good amount of online tutorials. It doesn't have anywhere near as many as Unity, honestly. But realistically, you can still probably find most of what you need to find out online. There's just, like, whereas Unity might have about 50 videos on the exact same thing, Unreal might have about 5 on the same thing. There are still a lot of videos. I'm not saying there aren't, but it's nowhere near in comparison to Unity. Debugging can be a bit tricky, as it's mostly in Visual Studio or whatever IDE you're in. Now, that can be kind of a blessing and a curse sometimes. Like if you're used to debugging programs like without a game engine, you'll know about breakpoints and stuff like that. That is something you can't really do in Unity, but you can in Unreal, and that's very useful because obviously you're building it through the editor. Because you kind of build one thing is it's much better to build the engine from the code every time as opposed to launching the engine. But that's a whole other bag of worms. But it's mostly you're a lot more likely to crash when there are problems in Unreal. Like the whole thing just crashes. I've had so many crashes on Unreal because of a bug. But yeah, documentation is lacking. It's often slow to be updated. I know that when I've been working in Unreal and there's been new features added, such as, oh, what was it called? It was something to do with AI. I can't remember what the feature was called, but it was something to do with searching. Like, it was like sensors, like searching the area around an agent. And there was just no information, and the little bit of information that was there was actually about an earlier version. And yeah, the documentation I've found for Unreal is pretty poor. If you go to the very basic stuff that's always been there, then that's fine, but you're not as often going to be looking up how to do the really easy stuff. You're going to be more often looking up how to do the really hard stuff, and that stuff is not very well written. There's very few examples of how things works. There's a lot more. If you're going to be using the visual scripting, the blueprints, the documentation is actually pretty good for that. But if you're trying to use C++, the documentation is pretty poor. But yes, as I said, it has a very long-standing visual scripting language, and it's very simple to pick up. It's not very difficult to wrap your head around. It can be a bit of a mess with lines going everywhere, but it's pretty simple, and you don't need to necessarily be a programmer to use it. And it uses C++. So, as I said there, memory management can come into play. Now, Unreal does have its own memory management. So, most of the time, if you're using built-in Unreal features, you won't have to worry about memory management. But when you start creating your own things that are maybe not actually, like if you're making a class that doesn't inherit from anything within Unreal, then you're going to have to do your own memory management. So that's where you can come into a lot of problems, which is just C++ really. So I wouldn't recommend using C++ in Unreal if you aren't already a C++ programmer. I mean, definitely go ahead and learn it if you want to, but it's definitely a lot trickier. But yeah, so moving on from that, the capabilities of both. So both of them can do everything the other can do, basically, in some way. Like, although Unity might be able to do one thing a lot easier, Unreal can also do it. It just takes a little bit more work. And it's the same the other way around. Unity is much better suited to mobile than Unreal. I can't say I've seen many Unreal mobile games. There are definitely some. There's a few. Tend to be the ones you see, the Unreal mobile games tend to be the kind of ports like your PUBG and stuff like that. Is PUBG Unreal? I'm not sure, but you know what I mean. Fortnite, for example. Fortnite is definitely Unreal. So you see stuff like that that's on mobile, and they're the kind of Unreal games you see on mobile, but most of what you see on mobile are Unity games. And the reason for that is it's very easy to build mobile games in Unity. So yeah, they've got So Unreal is often better for those with a design background. So if you're kind of more artistic, you want to do like level design and stuff like that, Unreal's got a lot more tools for kind of out of the box anyway, without actually installing plugins. It's got a lot more tools kind of built in that help with level design and stuff like that. And obviously because of the visual scripting language, means that although Unity does have one now, historically Unreal has always been better for those who are less programming oriented. Now I would probably say that this bolt is probably already perfectly usable. However, with it being kind of a fresh addition to the official build of Unreal of Unity, I would say probably Unreal, with the documentation that's behind it, has a kind of a stronger standing at the moment. Out of the box, Unreal's got better visuals. That's always been the case, but Unity can definitely I'm saying out of the box, you can still get to the same visuals on both, but Unreal is kind of you bring an asset into the scene and it instantly looks good, whereas Unity, you bring an asset into the scene, then you've got to do some toying around to make it look good. But Unity is catching up a lot recently. With the last kind of with the 2020 version of Unity, they've added a lot more high definition. High definition render pipeline. Although I think they changed the name. It was Universal. It was lightweight render pipeline and high definition. I think it's now high definition render pipeline and universal. And universal is basically kind of just the lightweight. They're moving away from their 3D model that they had, which was when you launched the project and you used 3D. And they're now trying to push you towards using either the Universal, which is a bit more lightweight and a bit more performant, or using the high definition, which is a lot less performant but looks great. But yeah, Unreal out of the box, definitely better visuals. Now, both have a wide array of free and paid assets in their store. So they've both got asset stores, and there are countless assets on both. I can't say really one has the advantage over the other with regards to assets. They've both got a massive wealth of them. Unreal is not well suited to being to 2D games. Although, as I said, it's possible to do anything on either. But Unity is kind of much better for 2D games, which is why you will see a lot more 2D games in Unity than Unreal. That's because Unity already has a 2D kind of workflow that exists, whereas Unreal, you've kind of got to figure it out for yourself a little bit. So some final points. Epic often, and this is a big thing, Epic, who are the owners of Unreal Engine, by the way, if you didn't know, often give away a large amount of high quality free assets, or they have big sales on their premium assets. Now, this is one place where this is of note is there was a game called Paragon. It was a MOBA a while ago, and basically they shelved the game. They stopped supporting it, and rather than kind of waste the work that had gone into it, they just gave away all the assets in the game for free. So now there's people remaking that game, and it's on it's getting near, well, it's still early access, but it's getting near completion on Steam. But yeah, there's people who've basically taken those assets and they're remaking the game. There's no kind of strings attached. It's just free assets, and they keep giving away loads of free assets. Epic has a good history of giving lots of money and free stuff to people, especially developers. Now, whether that's because they are genuinely kind-hearted or whether that's because they're trying to force people to use their platform, that's up for debate. But it can't be argued that there is definitely benefits to using Unreal with regards to getting free stuff. For example, they recently, well, it wasn't that recently actually, but I think it was last year, they acquired Quixel. Or was it just the Megascans part of it? I think they acquired Quixel altogether, but Megascans from Quixel is a massive library of assets, really high quality, like 3D scans of objects from the real world. And if you're on Unreal, you can just use that for free, which is insane. So you can have extremely high quality assets straight out of the box for free, and there's so many of them that it doesn't look like a kind of a standard asset flip that you might see in some cases when you take free assets. So with regards to kind of free high quality assets, Unreal definitely has the edge. Unity has recently started offering public shares, which is something to note, because that means there's a lot more funding going into Unity. And since they've made this change, they've also made a change that if you're a Unity developer, you'll know about this annoyance, in that anybody today uses Dark Theme for their Chrome, for their phone, for everything. Dark Theme is everywhere. Now, for some reason, Unity insisted for so many years that the Dark Theme was locked behind a paywall, and you had to buy the Pro version the Plus version, or the Plus version is the kind of middle ground version. So you had to buy at least some kind of premium version to get Dark Theme. And anytime anybody would ask why it's not there, they would say, sorry, we're just not able to do that yet. Oh, we can't we're not capable. They never really were honest and just said, no, we're not doing that. We want your money, obviously. But they always made an excuse that they weren't capable. Well, now they've gone into public ownership. Well, they're offering public shares anyway. They've now allowed people to use Dark Theme after years and years of people begging. So that's very good. So along with that bold acquisition that they got, they've also released Dark Theme to the world, which is fantastic. Unreal has strong out-of-the-box VR setup. So if you are creating a project, within the project creation window, you can just create a VR project, instantly slap your headset on, and you're in. and you've already got it set up. You've got like a character controller that just kind of works. It's great. Like in terms of just being able to just use VR straight away and start working on a VR project, it's fantastic. Now, Unity can definitely do VR, and it has VR tools, but they're very much a work in progress. There's a lot of, I mean, I'm currently working on a VR game in Unity, and there's a lot of kind of problems you've got to deal with that you just don't have to deal with the Unreal Engine version. Unreal has various AI focused features, so and they make things a lot easier. So you can use decision trees, and you can actually draw out them, kind of like the visual scripting. Well, that's what it is really. But they've got special things for these kind of AI features where you can map out AI in a graph, which is kind of it's very useful, because if you've studied any kind of game development, and you know about decision trees and behavior trees, and what is the other state machines, you can do all that in kind of graph form in Unreal, which you can't. Well, you can probably do in Unity with plugins, but you can't really do that out of the box, which is really useful. Like when you're trying to mess around and trying to make good AI, you can do it straight away out of the box, which is fantastic. And one more thing is Unity has a built-in ad network for apps. So I've just realized I spelled apps wrong there. But anyway, so if you want to have a mobile game, like I said earlier about Unity is pretty good for mobile games. It's really easy to get it set up. You can also get ads set up in basically a couple of clicks, and you can start making money from ad revenue straight away. There are obviously other ad networks that exist. You can use Google, you can use AdMob, you can use a few others. But the fact that you can just get this straight out of there, and you can get all the information about like who's watching your ads and all that just from your Unity account is very useful. Especially if you're just kind of starting out and you don't want to have like tools everywhere and loads of different things, and you want to just centralize everything into one account. You can do that with Unity. You can also use Unity Collab if you're working in a team with other people. And if you've used GitHub or any kind of repository, like kind of backup system, it's basically like that, except it's just built into the engine, and it's very easy to use. Now, I'm not saying Collab is as good as Git. It's definitely not. It has a lot of problems. There's a lot of bugs, although not as much anymore. But I know previously I've run into a lot of problems where commits just haven't worked properly. But Unity does try to centralize everything within it so that you don't need to have things all over the place and have loads of different programs for different things. Unity tries to bring everything all into one, which is very nice. So, like, based off all that, it really kind of, I couldn't necessarily recommend one or the other. It has to depend on who you are and what you're doing. If you are somebody who plans on making a high quality game with high revenue, and you're in a team of people, Unreal is almost definitely your answer. As long as you have a C++ programmer, that is, or more, preferably more than just one. But if you have a team of people and you're wanting to make a lot of money, then Unreal can basically let you make a lot more money without paying. And as I said, you've got a lot of high quality assets that are free that you can easily access, and then a lot of kind of really good ones that are cheap as well. Now, if you're wanting to start out with game development, I would definitely recommend Unity every time, because it's just so much easier to use. Like, in terms of like progress, I could make the same game on Unity in Unreal, but I could make the game in Unity in one day and it would take me a week in Unreal. Now, although I think I can achieve a better result overall eventually with Unreal, Unity is definitely much better for making a quick turnaround game. Just because of all the features that are kind of implemented to just make things easy, and the really easy documentation, all of the information that's out there online on how to do things is so useful. I can't, in terms of for a beginner or for somebody who wants a quick turnaround, Unity is fantastic, and definitely Unity for mobile games. But if you're somewhere in between them, like maybe you are a bit of an experienced developer, but maybe you're not in a full team, or maybe you have a full team and you are a bit experienced, but you're not expecting to earn millions. Then on that hand, I would say you could really go either way. There are positives and negatives to both, and I would say it's worth looking into yourself a bit more. But what I would say is Unity is definitely like in terms of like ease of use, Unity 100%. In terms of wealth of features, Unreal, and you've got to kind of find that middle ground as to do you want to do you want to be bashing your head off the keyboard struggling on things, but you're getting lots of features, or do you want to have an easy time moving through things, still be able to produce a very good game, but perhaps end up paying a little bit more and have a little bit less high quality assets. Of course, it really doesn't matter which engine you pick if you have a team of people who, as in like you have a 3D modeler, you have an artist, you can create all your own assets. In that kind of situation, it doesn't matter. I think the key thing to take about this is it's all down to personal preference, and if you want to pick one over the other, you just go for it. Hopefully this information has been useful in helping you decide which one to pick. But personally, if I have to pick one, I'm picking Unity most of the time. So yeah. But anyway, that's all for today. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.